Could you get me to the hospital? She begged, clueless that he was a renowned doctor. Lanterns flickered against the fog that rolled from the river, creating long, dancing shadows on the walls of old buildings. The night smelled of wet stone and cold wind, carrying with it a sense of unease, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Ilara stumbled along the empty street, her shoes slipping against the slick stones. Her hands were soaked, and her coat clung to her trembling body. She had no idea where she was going, only that she had to keep moving. The fear that had been growing inside her for days had become unbearable tonight. She was running from something she could not see, from dangers that lurked in the shadows of her past. A sharp pain shot through her leg, and she fell to her knees, gasping. "Please, someone help me." Her voice was weak, almost swallowed by the storm, but no one answered. The streets were deserted. Only the wind and the relentless rain seemed alive. Ilara pressed her hand to her side, wincing as a deeper pain cut through her. She realized she could not go on much longer. Her breaths came in shallow, rapid gasps, and a chill wrapped itself around her bones. She tried to rise, but her body refused to obey. Her vision blurred, and the world around her spun like a wheel in the storm. Then through the mist she saw a figure, a man walking with calm, deliberate steps. He moved as if the storm itself parted for him. Even at a distance, she could feel the strength in his presence, the quiet authority that surrounded him. Something about him made her heart beat faster, though she had no idea why. "Please, could you help me?" she called, her voice trembling with both pain and desperation. The man stopped. For a moment he merely watched her, his eyes hidden beneath the brim of a dark hat, and then he stepped closer. Even in the rain, his coat remained dry, his movements precise and controlled. He looked at her with sharp, piercing eyes that seemed to see every ache in her body, every fear in her mind. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, his voice calm but commanding, like the voice of someone used to being obeyed. "You're hurt. You need help." Ilara tried to speak, but her lips were numb and her words barely formed. I can't walk, it hurts too much." Without another word, the man knelt beside her and with a strength that surprised her, lifted her into his arms. She felt herself being carried through the storm, her body pressed close to his, and for a moment she forgot the fear and the pain. The warmth of his coat and the steadiness of his hands were unlike anything she had ever known. Where are you taking me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Somewhere safe," he replied. "You're not alone anymore." The city streets blurred past them as he moved with a purpose that seemed almost otherworldly. Ilara's mind spun with questions. Who was he? Why did he help her? There was something familiar in his presence, something that felt like both danger and safety at the same time. As they reached the edge of the city, the man opened the door of a black carriage waiting under a wrought iron archway. The horses whinnied, stamping their hooves in the mud. He gently laid Ilara inside, covering her with a heavy cloak. The warmth of the carriage felt like a cocoon against the storm. "Hold on," he said, climbing in beside her. The wheels of the carriage began to turn, splashing through puddles as the rain continued to lash against the windows. Ilara's head lolled against the soft fabric of the seat, and she studied him. He was taller than most men she had seen, with dark hair plastered to his forehead by the rain. His eyes were a striking color, sharp and intelligent, almost as if they could read her thoughts. She shivered not from the cold but from a strange, unexplainable sensation that raced through her chest. You're strong," she said finally, her voice weak. "Stronger than anyone I've ever met." He glanced at her briefly, a shadow crossing his expression, but he said nothing. His focus remained on the path ahead, the way he guided the carriage through the storm with unerring precision. There was an air of command about him, a sense that he was used to controlling situations that others could not manage. As the carriage turned onto a winding road leading out of the city, Ilara tried to piece together her thoughts. She didn't even know his name. She didn't know why he was helping her or if he might disappear like so many others had in her life. And yet, she felt a flicker of trust, fragile but undeniable. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he adjusted the cloak around her, tucking it carefully to shield her from the rain. "Because it needs to be done," he finally said, his tone neutral but firm. "You're not in a condition to make decisions for yourself. I will get you to safety." Alara looked at him, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and admiration. There was something in the way he spoke, the way he moved, that made her believe him. And yet, there was a mystery that surrounded him, something she could not name. Hours seemed to pass in silence, broken only by the sound of rain and the creaking of the carriage. The road became narrower, flanked by dense, dark woods. Mist curled around the trees, creating ghostly shapes that seemed to move with every flash of lightning. Alara felt her heart race. Something about this place felt alive, almost aware of her presence, and she could not shake the feeling that eyes were watching them. "Are we almost there?" she asked, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "Yes," he replied without looking at her. "But you must stay still. The journey is not over until we arrive." When the carriage finally stopped, they were at the gates of a tall, imposing mansion perched on a hill. The building was old, its stone walls covered in creeping ivy. Windows glimmered with soft light, and the air seemed warmer, safer, though no less mysterious. He lifted her once more and carried her inside. The interior smelled of herbs, old wood, and something faintly metallic, a scent that felt both strange and comforting. Candles flickered on every surface, casting shadows that danced along the high ceilings. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, and intricate instruments of unknown purpose glimmered under the soft light. "Where am I?" Alara asked, her voice trembling. "You're safe now," he said, setting her gently onto a cushioned chair near a fire that crackled in the hearth. "I will take care of you. That is all you need to know for now." Alara studied him carefully. There was a calm authority in his movements, a precision that suggested he had done this before countless times. And yet there was a weight in his eyes, a burden she could not understand. You seem different," she said after a long pause. "I mean, you're not like anyone I've ever met. Who are you?" He hesitated, and for a brief moment she thought she saw a flicker of something vulnerable in his gaze. But then, just as quickly, it vanished. "I am someone who helps those in need," he said quietly. "That is enough for now." Alara nodded, but her mind was racing. There was so much she wanted to ask, so much she needed to know, yet her body protested every movement. She realized how weak she had become, how much she had relied on the kindness of a stranger. And yet there was something in him that felt inevitable, as if their meeting had been destined. She tried to stand, only to stumble back into the chair. Pain lanced through her side again, sharp and unrelenting. He noticed immediately and moved to support her, his hand steady and gentle. "You must rest," he said firmly. "You cannot continue like this. Not yet." As she leaned back, her eyes met his, and for the first time she allowed herself to feel safe. The storm outside no longer seemed as threatening, though she could hear it still pounding against the windows. She realized she had no idea who this man truly was, yet a strange sense of trust had begun to form between them. And then, just as she was beginning to relax, a faint shadow moved past the window behind him, a figure cloaked in darkness, barely visible in the flickering candlelight. She gasped quietly, and he turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. "Someone is watching us," he murmured, his voice tight with tension. "And they are not here by chance." Alara's heart thudded painfully in her chest. She had thought the worst was over, that being in the carriage and finally inside this mysterious mansion would make her safe. But now, as she looked into the fire and then to the shadowed window, she realized that danger was far from gone. The man, her mysterious savior, stood tall and alert, as if anticipating what was to come. His calm demeanor had vanished, replaced by a quiet intensity that made her shiver. She did not understand what was happening, only that she was entirely dependent on him. And in that moment, she understood something else, too. She had stepped into a world she did not yet comprehend, a world where shadows moved with intent and storms whispered secrets. And in that world, she was not alone, because the man who held her fate in his hands was unlike anyone she had ever met. As the storm raged outside and the shadow lingered, Alara felt the first stirrings of a strange, inexplicable bond with the man who had saved her. Something told her that this night, this meeting, would change her life forever. And then the shadow moved closer, and the candles flickered violently, throwing the room into momentary darkness. The unknown watcher outside had made their presence known, and for the first time, Alara realized that her danger was far from over. The night had only just begun. The rain had eased by dawn, but the mansion on the hill remained cloaked in mist. The forest around it was quiet, almost too quiet, as if the world was holding its breath after the storm. Alara awoke on a soft bed in a room filled with warm light, her body aching but her injuries tended to. She blinked against the morning glow, trying to remember how she had arrived here, and her thoughts drifted to the man who had saved her. He was nowhere in the room. Only the faint smell of herbs lingered in the air, mixed with the warm scent of firewood from the hearth. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and rose slowly, testing the strength of her body. Each movement reminded her of the sharp pain in her side, and she winced. Someone had taken care of her, someone extraordinary, she realized. As she stepped toward the door, she saw him. Lucian Vale stood at the window, looking out into the misty forest. His profile was sharp against the soft light, his dark eyes hidden beneath a shadow of thought. He did not notice her immediately. "Alara," he said finally without turning, "you are awake." "Yes," she replied, her voice small, hesitant. "Thank you for everything." He turned slowly, his gaze meeting hers. There was a quiet intensity in his eyes that made her chest tighten. "You were in grave danger," he said. "You should not have been alone in the city, not at night, and certainly not in that storm." Alara took a deep breath. I didn't know where to go. I was running." "From what?" he asked, his voice calm but firm, commanding attention. She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. There were truths even she had not fully understood yet. I can't explain right now," she said finally. "It's complicated." Lucian's expression softened slightly, though the sharpness in his eyes remained. "Very well," he said. "But you will need to tell me. The danger that follows you may not wait for explanations." He gestured for her to sit, and she did, feeling the warmth of the room seep into her bones. Lucian moved to a small cabinet, producing a cloth soaked in warm water and a few herbs. He approached her carefully, kneeling to attend to the bruises on her arms and legs. "You move too quickly," he said gently. "You must take care of yourself. Your body cannot bear more than it already has endured." She looked at him, studying his hands, the way he moved with precision and care. It was as if every action was measured, deliberate, purposeful. You are amazing," she said softly. "I've never met anyone like you." Lucian did not answer immediately. His gaze flickered to the window, to the forest beyond, and then back to her. "I am trained," he said finally. "I know how to heal. That is all you need to know." Alara watched him closely. Something in his voice and the way he spoke hinted at experiences far beyond what he admitted. There was a depth to him, a knowledge that seemed almost supernatural, though he carried it with quiet restraint. She felt both comforted and unnerved at the same time. The morning passed in silence, punctuated only by the occasional crackle of the fire and the soft rustle of leaves outside. Alara began to explore the room, her curiosity growing despite her injuries. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, their spines worn with age. Strange instruments of unknown purpose glimmered under the sunlight that filtered through the tall windows. "This place, it's incredible," she murmured. Lucian's lips pressed into a thin line. It is a place of study, a place to learn to understand. It is not meant for comfort, though it provides some. Her eyes lingered on a portrait hanging above the fireplace, a painting of a man in a white coat, with awards and symbols etched into frames she could not decipher. "Who is this?" she asked. "That is someone I helped," Lucian said, his voice quieter than before. "Many years ago. Their life was nearly lost, and now they live on. I keep the portrait to remind me of what is possible and what must be protected." Alara felt a chill. There was a sense of history here, of knowledge and power that stretched beyond what she could imagine. And yet, there was also kindness in him, a willingness to protect, to save, that made her chest ache with gratitude, and something more she could not yet name. As she spoke, Lucian's expression shifted subtly, a shadow of worry crossing his face. "You must rest more," he said. "There is still weakness in your body, and there are other matters that demand attention." Alara's curiosity piqued. "Other matters?" she asked. He hesitated, then said quietly, "You are not here by accident. Your injuries, your condition, they are connected to things far older and darker than you know." Her heart beat faster. I don't understand. What do you mean?" Lucian studied her closely, his eyes narrowing as if searching for answers hidden deep within her. "There are forces at work," he said finally. "Forces that do not forgive weakness. Forces that follow you even now. I can help you survive, but you must trust me completely." Alara swallowed hard. The weight of his words pressed upon her, making the room feel smaller, the shadows deeper. I don't know if I can," she whispered. "You will," he said softly, placing a hand over hers. The touch was brief, but it sent a jolt of warmth through her. "You must. The choice is not yours alone anymore." The rest of the day passed in quiet tension. Lucian attended to her wounds, prepared nourishing food, and guided her through gentle exercises to regain her strength. Alara began to notice the way he moved, the precision in his hands, the subtle power in his voice. She had thought she was fragile, alone, and weak, but in his presence she began to feel the stirrings of courage, the first flickers of hope. As evening fell, the mansion seemed to transform. Candlelight flickered across the stone walls, and the shadows lengthened into strange shapes that danced and shifted. Lucian led Alara to the study, a large room filled with books, instruments, and strange glass containers glowing faintly with magical light. "This is where I work," he said, "where I try to understand the forces that threaten people like you." Alara stepped inside, her eyes wide. "It's beautiful," she breathed. He did not smile, but his gaze softened. "It is necessary. Knowledge is power, and power can protect or destroy." As she wandered among the shelves, she noticed an open book on a desk. Its pages were filled with diagrams, symbols, and notes in a careful, precise hand. She realized with a shiver that some of the symbols resembled the strange marks she had seen on her own skin in the days before the storm. "Lucian," she began, her voice barely audible. These symbols, I've seen them before, on me." He looked at her, his face darkening. "Then you understand more than you think. The signs are not accidental. They are part of something much larger, something that has followed you for a long time." Her pulse quickened. Fear mixed with fascination. She had thought the danger was behind her, but now it felt closer than ever. And yet, she also felt a strange connection to this man who seemed to know more than anyone else could. "You're not just a doctor," she said softly, almost a whisper. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I am more than that, but that will have to wait. Right now you must recover. Your survival depends on it." A sudden noise startled them both, a faint tapping at the window. Alara's heart leapt into her throat. She turned, but the mist outside made it impossible to see clearly. Lucian moved swiftly to the window, his body tense, every movement precise. He drew aside the curtain, peering into the gray morning light. For a moment, nothing moved. Then a shadow flickered among the trees just beyond the reach of the firelight. "They are watching," he said quietly, his voice low and urgent. "And they are close, far closer than you imagine. Alara felt a chill run down her spine. She had thought the worst of her troubles had ended when she reached the carriage, when she found shelter, when she met him. But now she understood. The danger had followed her here. And her mysterious savior, this man whose calm presence had given her hope, was preparing to face it. She looked at him, a mix of fear and trust in her eyes. What do we do?" Lucian did not answer immediately. His gaze lingered on the forest beyond, dark and silent, and then he turned to her. "We survive," he said simply, "and we uncover the truth, together." Alara nodded, though her stomach twisted with anxiety. She felt the first real stirrings of hope, but also the weight of uncertainty. She had stepped into a world she did not fully understand, a world of shadows, power, and danger. And yet, for the first time, she did not feel entirely alone. Outside, the mist thickened. The shadow that had been watching them moved closer, silent and patient, waiting for the perfect moment. Inside, Lucian and Alara prepared themselves for the unknown, their fates intertwined by circumstance, courage, and an unspoken bond that was growing stronger with every passing moment. The night would bring answers, or it would bring more danger. And neither of them could know which until the darkness came. The mansion was quiet, but the air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves carried secrets. The mist outside had thickened into a living gray curtain, curling around the stone pillars and creeping along the pathways like a silent tide. Alara sat near the fire, her knees drawn close to her chest, thinking about everything Lucian had told her. "Something is following me," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling slightly. "Something I can't see." Her hand brushed against the faint marks on her arm, the ones that had appeared the day she collapsed in the rain. She had tried to ignore them, but now they seemed to pulse, as if alive. Fear gripped her chest, but alongside it, a strange determination began to rise. She would not be helpless. Not again. Lucian emerged from the shadowed hallway, carrying a tray of herbs and a small flask of dark liquid. His movements were careful, precise, but there was an intensity in his eyes that made her heart race. "You should drink this," he said, setting the tray beside her. "It will calm the inflammation and help the marks fade, but it will not remove the danger." Alara took the flask, her fingers brushing his briefly. She felt warmth, a spark she could not explain. What is happening to me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucian sat opposite her, studying her with piercing eyes. "You are tied to something older and darker than yourself," he said. "A curse has been following your family for generations. It chooses its targets carefully, and it feeds on fear and weakness. You are its next mark." Alara's breath caught in her throat. "A curse," she repeated. I don't understand. How could that happen to me?" He leaned closer, his voice low and steady. "Some things are beyond simple explanation, but there is hope, always hope. It requires courage, trust, and knowledge. All three are necessary to break the bond the curse has over you." She looked at him, fear and awe mixing in her chest. "And you can help me," he nodded, but there was a shadow in his expression. "I can try, but this is not just medicine. It is something more. Something dangerous." Alara felt the weight of his words settle over her like a heavy cloak. She wanted to speak, to ask questions, but she realized she did not have the strength. Not yet. She would have to trust him. Lucian helped her to her feet, guiding her toward a door she had not seen before. Beyond it was a small chamber, lined with books, scrolls, and strange devices that glimmered faintly in the candlelight. The air smelled of herbs and something metallic, sharp and alive. "This is the chamber where I study the forces that cannot be explained by medicine alone," he said. "It is here that I can try to understand the curse that has touched you." Alara stepped inside, her eyes wide. Strange symbols were etched into the floor, glowing faintly with a pale light. Strange instruments of glass and metal hummed softly, as if they had a life of their own. She felt both awe and fear. Lucian placed a hand on her shoulder. "Do not be afraid. These tools are meant to help, not harm, but you must remain still and trust me completely." She nodded, swallowing hard. She had never felt more vulnerable, yet strangely more alive. There was a connection between them, a bond formed in shared danger, in trust and unspoken understanding. She realized she was beginning to depend on him, not just for safety, but for something deeper, something she could not yet name. Lucian began the process carefully, drawing symbols on parchment and murmuring words she did not understand. He dipped her hand in a warm solution that glimmered with a soft light, and then he placed small stones over the marks on her skin. She felt a tingling warmth spread from them, a gentle pulse that seemed to sync with her heartbeat. "You may feel faint or dizzy," he warned. "This is part of the process. The curse resists, but it will weaken if you remain calm and focused." Elara nodded, biting her lip as a wave of dizziness passed over her. She closed her eyes, focusing on his voice, on the steady rhythm of his instructions. For the first time, she felt a strange sense of control, not over the curse itself, but over her own fear. As the ritual continued, the room seemed to grow colder, and the shadows on the walls lengthened, twisting into shapes that made her skin crawl. She opened her eyes to see Lucian standing silently, his gaze intense, his hands steady despite the growing tension in the air. Then she saw it, a flicker of movement in the corner of the room. A shadow, darker than the others, flicked across the wall. It was small at first, almost like a wisp of smoke, but it grew, stretching toward her like a living thing. She gasped, and the tingling in her veins grew stronger, almost painful. Lucian moved swiftly, placing a protective hand in front of her. "It is trying to break the connection," he said. "Do not fear it. Focus on the warmth, on the light. Do not let it control you." She clenched her fists, trying to steady herself. She had been afraid her entire life of people, of the dark, of what she could not understand. But now she realized that fear would not serve her. She would not allow the curse to define her. The shadow writhed and twisted, and a cold, whispering voice filled the room. It spoke in words she did not understand, yet they struck deep into her mind, stirring memories she had long tried to forget: loss, betrayal, helplessness. She felt tears prick her eyes but held her ground, keeping her focus on Lucian and the warmth of the stones on her skin. Lucian's voice was steady, guiding her, grounding her. "You are stronger than it believes. It cannot touch you if you do not let it. Trust yourself. Trust me." A final surge of energy pulsed through the room, and the shadow recoiled, hissing as it dissolved into the air like smoke in the wind. The candles flickered, and the room returned to its previous calm, though a faint chill lingered. Elara sank to her knees, exhausted, her body trembling from the effort. Lucian knelt beside her, placing a steadying hand on her back. "You did it," he said softly. "You resisted. That is more than most could manage." She looked up at him, breathless, and realized how close they were. His eyes, dark and piercing, held something she had not seen before, a quiet pride, tempered with concern. She felt her chest tighten with emotions she could not name, a mix of gratitude, awe, and something more intimate, more dangerous. You saved me," she whispered. He shook his head slightly. "We saved each other," he said. His voice was low, steady, almost a whisper, but it carried a weight that made her heart skip. For a moment they remained like that, kneeling together, the firelight flickering across their faces, the connection between them unspoken but undeniable. Then the shadows moved again. Not inside the room this time, but outside, beyond the windows. A figure emerged from the mist, cloaked and silent, watching the mansion. Lucian's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing. "They are close," he said, rising swiftly. "Closer than I anticipated. And they are not coming for you alone, they are coming for both of us." Elara felt a wave of fear, stronger than anything she had known. Who are they?" she asked, her voice shaking. Lucian did not answer immediately. Instead, he moved to a small cabinet, pulling out a set of strange, metallic devices and vials filled with glowing liquids. He placed them carefully on the table, as if preparing for a battle she could not yet see. "They are part of the curse," he said finally. "It has a will of its own, and it sends agents, shadows, messengers, to prevent its victims from escaping. We must be ready." Alara swallowed hard, her mind racing. She had thought the ritual had weakened the curse, but now she realized it was far from over. And yet she also understood something she had not before. She was not helpless. With Lucian by her side, with his guidance and knowledge, she had a real chance to survive. He looked at her, his eyes softening for the briefest moment. "You must trust me completely," he said. "If we fail, the consequences are far greater than either of us can imagine." She nodded, a mixture of fear and determination in her eyes. "I trust you," she whispered. A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, and the mansion seemed to shiver. Outside, the shadow moved closer, merging with the mist like a living storm. Alara felt the tension tighten around them, the weight of danger pressing against their sanctuary. Lucian moved to the window, placing a hand on the sill. "They are coming," he said. "Prepare yourself. This is only the beginning." Alara looked at him, her chest tight, her mind racing. She had faced storms before, both outside and within herself. But nothing had prepared her for this. A world of shadows, curses, and a man whose presence had already begun to change everything. And as the mist pressed against the windows, as the shadows whispered from the darkness, she realized that her life and her heart would never be the same again. The night ahead promised danger, revelation, and transformation. And neither of them could turn away. The night had grown heavy around the mansion, the mist pressing close against the stone walls. Shadows moved with a life of their own, curling like smoke from the edges of the trees, and the wind carried a whispering that sent shivers down Alara's spine. She stood near the fire, her hands trembling, but her eyes were steady. She had come far since the stormy night when she had collapsed on the streets, weak and terrified. Now, though fear still lingered, courage had begun to root itself deep within her. Lucian moved silently beside her, his presence calm yet commanding. His eyes scanned the shadows outside, searching for the danger that had followed her here. There was no panic in his movements, only precision, the steady control of someone who had faced death many times and emerged victorious. And yet, for all his confidence, Alara sensed the weight he carried, the responsibility, the fear, and the burden of knowledge that few could ever comprehend. "They are close," he said quietly, his voice steady. "Closer than I thought, but you are ready, Alara." "More than you know." She looked up at him, her chest tight with anticipation. "Ready? I don't know if I'm ready." "You are," he said firmly, his gaze locking onto hers. "You have faced your fear, resisted the curse, and found strength in yourself. That is what will save you now." A sudden rustle outside made them both tense. The shadow that had stalked them from the edge of the forest now emerged, moving like a living mist, twisting and flickering in impossible ways. Its form was dark, ever-changing, and though it had no face, Alara felt its gaze burn into her. Lucian stepped forward, placing a protective hand lightly on her shoulder. "Stay close," he instructed. "Focus on the light within yourself and on my voice. The curse feeds on fear and doubt. Do not give it either." Alara took a deep breath, recalling every lesson Lucian had taught her. She focused on the warmth of the stones he had placed on her skin, the glow of the firelight around them, and the steady rhythm of his voice. The shadows writhed closer, but she did not falter. The first strike came without warning. A tendril of darkness shot through the room, aiming for her. Lucian reacted instantly, his hands moving with the precision of someone who had performed countless life-saving acts. He deflected it with a wave of energy from a small amulet around his neck, and the darkness recoiled, hissing like a cornered creature. Alara's heart pounded. I can do this," she asked, her voice tight with fear and determination. "Yes," Lucian said, his voice firm but encouraging. "Together, you and I are stronger than this." The shadow surged again, and this time it struck with more force. Ilara felt a cold pressure pressing against her chest, threatening to overwhelm her. But she did not scream, did not yield. She recalled the moments in the chamber, the ritual that had connected her to the light, and she pushed against the darkness with every ounce of courage she had. Lucian's hands guided hers, helping her channel the strength within. "Focus," he whispered. "The power is inside you, do not doubt it." A warmth spread through her veins, a light that grew brighter with each heartbeat. The shadow recoiled, screeching like wind through empty halls, and for a moment the room was filled with a blinding glow. Ilara felt her fear dissolve, replaced by a clarity and strength she had never known. "Now!" Lucian shouted, and together they pushed forward. The energy they created merged, a wave of light and warmth that engulfed the shadow. It twisted, shrieked, and then vanished, leaving only a faint wisp of mist that quickly dissipated. Ilara sank to her knees, breathless, her body trembling from the effort. Lucian knelt beside her, steadying her with gentle hands. "You did it," he said softly. "You faced it. You are free." Her chest heaved, tears pricking her eyes. I actually did it," she whispered. "Yes," he said, his gaze intense yet tender. "And in doing so, you have changed yourself. You are no longer the same frightened girl who stumbled through the rain. You are strong, courageous, alive." She looked at him, and for the first time she allowed herself to see him fully, not just as her protector, but as a man whose life had also been shaped by isolation, burden, and unspoken pain. The bond between them, forged in fear, trust, and survival, now shimmered like the firelight that danced across the room. Lucian reached out, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. "You trusted me," he said quietly, "and that trust saved both of us." Ilara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a fluttering she could not name. I trusted you," she admitted, her voice soft but firm, "and I think I don't want to stop trusting you." He allowed himself a small, rare smile. "Then we will not," he said. "We will face whatever comes together." The storm outside had faded entirely, leaving the mansion bathed in the pale light of the moon. The shadows that had stalked them were gone, but a quiet vigilance remained. Lucian and Ilara moved through the halls, checking the doors and windows, ensuring that the threat had truly passed. As they reached the main chamber, Lucian paused and looked at her. "There is one more thing," he said. "The curse, it is not just darkness, it has a purpose. It chooses its victims to teach, to test, and sometimes to reveal what is hidden in the heart." Ilara frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, his voice low and deliberate, "that surviving it was not just about strength. It was about trust, courage, and the willingness to change. You have faced all three. You are transformed." She felt a shiver of understanding. The fear, the danger, the helplessness she had carried for so long, all of it had been a crucible, shaping her into someone stronger. And beside her, Lucian had been both guide and mirror, reflecting back to her the courage she had almost forgotten she possessed. They stood together in the moonlight, the quiet of the night surrounding them like a protective veil. Lucian's eyes softened as he studied her face, and she felt a connection deeper than words could express. "You have grown stronger than you know," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "And in doing so, you have changed me as well." Ilara's breath caught. "Changed you?" she echoed. He nodded, a shadow of vulnerability in his gaze. "I have lived long enough to believe that solitude is safer, but seeing your courage, your trust, it has reminded me that connection, love, and hope are worth the risk." For a long moment they stood silently, the room bathed in silver moonlight. Then slowly they reached for each other's hands. It was a gentle touch, yet full of unspoken promises, a bond forged in darkness, strengthened in courage, and sealed by trust. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying a sense of peace. The mansion, once heavy with shadows and danger, now felt alive with warmth, with possibility, with life. The curse had been broken, but its lessons remained, etched into their hearts forever. Ilara looked at Lucian, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and something deeper. I don't know what comes next, she admitted. Then we will find out together, he said softly, guiding her toward the hearth. Whatever comes, we face it side by side. No fear, no hesitation. Just trust. She nodded, feeling a weight lift from her chest. For the first time in her life, she felt safe, not just in body but in heart and spirit. And she realized that the man who had saved her, who had guided her through shadows and fear, was no longer just a stranger. He was part of her life, part of her story, part of her future. The fire crackled softly, casting warm light across the room. Outside, the moon shone through the mist, illuminating the quiet forest. There was still mystery in the world, still unknown dangers, but for the first time, Alara believed that she could face them. Lucian reached out and gently held her hand. The night is calm now, he said, but even if darkness returns, we have each other. That is enough. Alara smiled, a small, serene smile. Yes, she whispered, that is enough. And as they stood together hand in hand, the mansion seemed to breathe, as if it too had been transformed. The shadows were gone, the storm had passed, and a new chapter of courage, trust, and love was beginning. The night had been long and full of danger, but it had also brought redemption, transformation, and the promise of something brighter. And for the first time, Alara and Lucian faced the future, not with fear but with hope together.